Taking another deep breath in, we come into this moment, grounding ourselves once again. We breathe in peace, we exhale love. So, for those of you who are joining us online, who could not be with us today or maybe live in a different state, we just played the song Shake It Out by Florence and the Machine, but this version we had it by the Glee cast. And we've been having a bit of a discussion about domestic violence, addiction, and really just sometimes isolation in general, and how we may suffer silently. And so we're going to go ahead and start we're going to start in that direction of today's sermon, and we're going to work through it together. So let's take a breath. So Thich Nhat Hanh, one of my new favorite books by him is Joyfully Together, The Art of Building Our Harmonious Community. And a lot of this wisdom is what they actually use at Plum Village in France with his monastic brothers and sisters. And so I'm just going to share a little bit, and some of the vocabulary may not tie perfectly over into here in the West. I will go ahead and define it later. Really, the main one is you're going to hear the word Sangha, and Sangha is just another word for community. So let's breathe that in. And he's going to be talking about monks and brothers and sisters. Just view that as you. We're all brothers and sisters in this community, whether or not we're actually monastics. The tiger who left the mountain. When someone leaves the Sangha, it will be difficult for their practice to be successful. Vietnamese people have a saying, if the monk leaves the Sangha, the monk will be destroyed. Just as if the tiger comes down from the mountain, the tiger will be caught. A practitioner may stand solid as the lord of the mountain and forests, and may speak as powerfully as the tiger roars, but if he leaves the Sangha body and goes out on his own, just like the tiger who has left the mountain, he will be caught or destroyed. Breathe that in. When we have difficulties and suffer, we have a tendency to want to run away. We long to find a place where we think life will be better for us. In your family, you might have all the material conditions you could wish for, but if you have a problem with your father, your mother, brother, or sister, you may want to run away. In the Sangha, it's the same. When you're not happy with your teacher or your brothers and sisters in the practice, you may want to run away and go somewhere else. We dream about going to a tropical island, for example, even though we do not really know what the island might be like. Take a breath. And in this moment, let's pause and reflect how many times we have run away in our own lives, or how we've often imagined the grass to be greener, or in different relationships, or in different environments or locations, and how once we left that relationship and started another, there were other conflicts that bothered us, or we moved to a different location and there was a new issue that bothered us. So really, no issue, no situation or relationship on the planet is without some brushing up tension. Yet we don't always acknowledge that, and we still get caught up in running away, numbing ourselves, isolating ourselves. When we leave our Sangha body and search for another Sangha body, where we imagine we will have more peace and joy, it usually does not lead to success on our path of practice. This is because we are going in the opposite direction of the true spirit of what Buddha taught. When we become a monk or a nun, we make the great vow. Wherever we are, that is the place of our practice. I have seen so many monks and nuns who have fallen when they left the Sangha in order to live on their own. They are like the tiger who leaves the forest. Deep breath. So let me tie this back to all of us. Whenever we leave community or we leave anything, maybe even our own family, we are sometimes that tiger that left the forest. And how many of us may have even left an abusive situation, but then we still experience so much pain when we're alone. And that's what keeps a lot of people in abusive family dynamics, in abusive relationships, or maybe even in abusive communities that are filling their head with a lot of fear and guilt and shame. And so we're trapped in this cycle of suffering because a lot of times there's this interesting gap period that occurs when we do leave the mountain or we leave the forest. And then we have this isolating experience until we find another location or another community. Or maybe, as the actual teaching was saying, we literally have that quality within us where we're jumping from thing to thing to thing to thing. Or maybe we've never belonged to a thing. Sure, a thing, we'll just use that word. We've never belonged to a community. We've never really had a solid, loving relationship. Or maybe we struggled a lot with family dynamics and we kind of were brought up already in an abusive situation. So we don't know left from right, and we're just kind of doing our best as we go through this life together. And I'll be the first to admit it that here in the West, and maybe in the world collectively, we don't really do a great job at bringing together in peace, bringing people together in peace. We bring people together a lot of the time, but it's often with an underlying motivation or strings attached. We might inspire people together through fear. We might inspire people together through blaming an outside entity or an outside people. It's how many institutions on a planet exist today where one of their greatest standpoints is pointing at another group of people and saying they're wrong. Or maybe believing that you are the one in the right as your entity, as your group. Or this even occurs in just small family dynamics, where you might have someone in the household that believes that they're fully embodying that ego mindset where they won't listen to anyone else in the family and it's just their decision. How often has that occurred? Or even if you're just in a relationship and you have two strong minds constantly battling each other, and there's always that lack of compassionate listening. Breathe that in. So we come together in Sangha, we come together in these monasteries. That's why I love Plum Village, because for me and what I've witnessed, it's one of the few on the planet that really, really do embody these teachings. And we're starting to see them more and more spring up throughout the world. And this is a perfect example of our community here. And for those who joined us yesterday, you really got to see that, hot damn, it was harmonious. Hot damn, it was joyful. Hot damn, it was peaceful. And all of these beautiful, beautiful people of diversity coming together, and we don't give a shit about opinions. We don't give a shit about the left and the right. We're just coming together in harmony and enjoying company and practicing peace, practicing fellowship, practicing kindness, practicing just human decency. Breathe that in for a moment. Powerful shit. One more breath. So before I go into the main teaching, let's take a step back and let's make this a moment of awareness. Because here in the West, I have seen it occur again and again and again, where we focus so much on individuality, individualism. And we just are always, it's almost like me against the world, that mindset. And maybe you might include a few other people with you, as long as they agree. But it's this ideology where, well, if I'm not getting what I want here, then I'm going to separate and cut that tie. And it's almost like we're always staying on the surface level of things. And we're often fighting about the surface level of things. And so we never really take the full amount of time because we're also afraid of conflict. It's really weird. Like, we're really boisterous, but at the same time, we don't want to hurt everyone's feelings. And so or maybe we just don't want people mad at us. And so how many of you in this room, I've talked about this on a lot of Sundays now, but how many of you in this room have avoided difficult conversations with people because you don't like conflict, or you didn't want to have to deal with the negative repercussions of it? And so we don't actually ever have these difficult conversations. Or possibly because we're so caught up in our own ego and individuality that maybe if you are going to have a conversation with someone, maybe the other person, or it could be you, doesn't even hear the other person speaking. All that you're hearing or all that you're seeing is just you're looking at the world through your own viewpoint and your own perspectives. And that if someone agrees with your opinion, you have a great conversation. If someone disagrees with you, you get offended, you get angry. You don't actually ever get to get into the meat and potatoes of things. Sure, we'll go with that analogy. But think about that. Think about that even on a micro level of when that happens on your life. But just turn on the news and you're going to see it happening 24/7. And it happens in religions, it happens in politics, it happens in our communities, it happens on a very fundamental base level of just how we interact with each other. And that's why as we go through the Living Peace Code, we have ignorance is an illusion, we seek understanding. Today is chaos is an illusion, we seek harmony. Then we have duality is an illusion, we seek transcendence. If you don't know those words, we're going to define them, don't worry. And then we have release the mundane, release knowing, release self. As modern monks, our number one job is to let go of our opinions. Because if I have an opinion about who you are, I can't love you and I can't see you. I'm only seeing a reflection of you, a projection of you based on my own interpretation. Think of how many people in your life that you're only seeing an interpretation of who they really are, rather than letting go of all preconceived notions or all experiences you had with that person, dropping it completely, then going up to them and saying, tell me everything. Tell me your thoughts, your feelings, your concerns, even if you have beliefs and opinions that disagree with me, I want to hear it all. Tell me who you are. And even that's going to be limiting, but it's so much more expansive than our own perception of them, because we can never fully understand each other fully. But these practices help us bridge that gap a bit more. Because say we're only bridging it 10% now, we can at least bridge it 40 more percent. And that will help conversation so much more greatly and help people feel less alone in the world. Who has been in relationships or in family dynamics or communities but felt totally alone? Right? Point and match. We're surrounded by people, yet we feel so isolated and alone because we're not actually bridging those gaps of understanding and compassion. So many children, bless the way we raise our children right now. It's a little bit better than it was decades ago, but who's heard of the statement, children are seen but not heard? So you don't grow up with a complex, but still, we're still having that. And it's this ideology that just because you're under a certain age that you don't have much to share, you haven't lived enough. So we downplay their voice, we downplay their perspective. And in Thich Nhat Hanh and their Plum Village, when they have community meetings, they actually let the children speak and share their perception. Because even though they don't have the full life experience, they may say things that are just so contrary to what we think that it awakens us out of our own ego trip. Because they see things more simple. I can't remember what show it was, but it was something along the lines of, do you love the little girl or boy or whatever, I don't know, was saying something along the lines of, do you love this person? Aren't they family to us? And then the gentleman said, yes, they are. And then I think it was a little girl said, well, it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel that way because we take care of the ones we love. So why aren't we helping them right now? And then the adult says, well, it's complicated. And then the little girl's like, well, it doesn't have to be. But again, we complicate things in our mind because we get so caught up with our opinions and our judgments and the way that we're offended by things. Another thing we work on too, we don't get offended. We really don't, do it. It's been a long time. And even if we do get triggered slightly, we let that shit go because we recognize that it's just being offended, boom, builds a wall. It builds that blockade that keeps the heart from opening. So there is no point in getting offended by anything or anyone. Does that make sense? And that is one of the hardest things to do. That's why we have 9 steps, 9 easy steps that we just go through one at a time. Just kidding, they're not easy. They're simple, but not easy. So breathe that in for a moment. Now let's tie it in. You can open it up and follow along right here. So today's topic is chaos is an illusion, we seek harmony. And actually, 105, let me read a quick paragraph and help us define chaos. So traditionally, chaos is defined as disorder and confusion, physical disorder, mental confusion. However, here in Living Peace and here at the Zen Cowboy, we add that chaos is also energetic. Our vibrational aura is in turmoil due to the disharmony amongst our minds, bodies, and hearts. The reason we state, quote, chaos is illusion is because it is pure mental and emotional state that influences our physical reality. So we can quickly pierce its delusion and return to peace at any time. The external chaos we see out in the world in individuals or groups is simply the byproduct of their inner turbulence spilling over, while the perceived chaos we see in nature is actually not chaos at all, but life's natural balance and flow. So when you see like chaotic events with nature and stuff, that's just the natural world doing its thing. But when we see people fighting each other and all these disagreements, That is all human-made shit, because it's stemming from our own spilling over effect of the turbulence we have within ourselves. That's why when we have all these religious and political leaders that don't have inner peace within themselves, is it any wonder that they cannot actually create peace on the planet? Instead, they're creating more division. And so it doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum, let that go, let that opinion go, and or even religious spectrum, just focus on, is this leader at peace within themselves? And if not, then let me completely step away from the expectation that they're actually going to lead peace. Think about that for a moment. And think about that in your own homes and families. Are the parents at peace within themselves? If not, how the hell are they going to teach peace to their children? And Thich Nhat Hanh and a lot of spiritual teachers always focus on that. Instead of trying to constantly create peace and love the world, bullshit. Stop loving the world. You're not helping anything. Get your own peace. You having compassion, and when you turn on the news and you're crying and you're feeling all these things, you're like, oh, how horrible about all these things. That is not helping shit. Not helping anything. Instead of looking at the world and seeing all these things and it turns you into a puddle, or maybe the opposite, you get pissed off as fuck. That happens too. Neither of those things help the world. But instead, you're kind of like, well, I'm such a compassionate person. I'm feeling all these things. I have a big heart. But then look at your own family and see how they suffer. Instead of looking out, turn inward, look at your own family and see how they're suffering. Look at your own community, see how they're suffering. Look at your own self and see how you are suffering. Touch that pain. Touch that pain. Come to know it. Practice the peace teachings. Join sanghas, join communities, work together through it. And when you achieve more great harmony of mind, body, spirit within yourself and have that inner peace, boom, then you can start helping the world. But you can't help the world when you're caught up with your own shit. Because all you're doing is projecting. You're not even seeing the world. You're seeing the issues through your own biased lens of your own suffering. And so you might go, and who's ever just told your opinion to your friend and saying what they should do and to fix their lives and stuff, but it doesn't really help anything. And really you're just giving your own opinion based off of how you would respond to that situation, but they're a completely different individual, and what you're giving them is not actually helpful. Anyway, moving forward. Take a breath, please. What happens when you bleed and you don't attend to your wound? You spill blood onto anything you touch. The same applies to our personal energy, vibration, and degree of consciousness. If we are in fear, we spill fear. If we are in anger or grief, we are spilling anger and grief. Whatever mental or emotional pain we are experiencing, we spill that pain onto the people and into the environment in which we currently abide. We are like individual micro suns in our personal galaxy of life. We may shed ample light, withhold it, or possibly produce so much intensity that we incinerate everything around us. So what does all this have to do with chaos? Chaos is the byproduct of our human egos, the part of ourselves that is unable to allow life to flow in its natural course. Instead, our egos make us feel we must control our world and then those in it, and that's when chaos is created. I recently shared something on social media where I quoted this and I said, war, W-A-R, we are right. The byproduct of the creation of war stems from the collective, we are right. Breathe that in. And those battles, now moving on to what we actually wrote down, let me share this quote, and you can follow along if you'd like. And this is by Jack Kornfield. The unawakened mind tends to make war against the way things are. To follow a path with heart, we must understand the whole process of making war within ourselves and without, how it begins and how it ends. War's roots are in ignorance. Without understanding, we can easily become frightened by life's fleeting changes and the inevitable losses, disappointments, the insecurity of our aging and death. Misunderstanding leads us to fight against life, running from pain or grasping at security and pleasures that by their nature can never be satisfying. So contemplate within your own being. Is there division within my own mind, body, heart, and spirit? Is there division there? Why? And then you can ask, why the fuck am I not in therapy? Hot damn, I know so many people that would benefit from having actual therapy. But again, we have that individual mindset, well, I can deal with this on my own. I can deal with this. It's been fucking 20 years. How's that been working out for you, doing this on your own? How has this been working out for you, doing it on your own? Take a breath. That's a little hot button that gets me all fired up. Because it's interesting. And, like Thich Nhat Hanh, we've been doing this for 10 years now. And I do see when members leave the community and then they suffer. But again, it's that mindset of, I can do this on my own. And sure, you may get to a point of great understanding. Like, for example, we had 6 months, we had to go through this remodeling process, all these things. We were 6 months without a community. We left Arizona, we had a thriving community there. Then we were just very isolated here. We didn't know anyone. And it was very difficult. Because we live and breathe this, we were able to maintain our peace really well. But we weren't expanding anything. We were just doing our thing. We could easily just go on the mountain and just have our happy life alone. But what the hell's the point in that? Well, you're happy. I'd rather be happy with a group of people. I'd rather expand our hearts together, help increase peace on the planet. And so even though we have these teachings and we're able to apply it, expansion was not occurring. So even if you are a master of these teachings and then you just go out on your own and you don't want to have to deal with other people's shit, you stop expansion. And that's not helping anything. That's the selfish mind. That's the ego mind saying, well, I'm so peaceful when there's no one around to influence or bother me. That's not enlightenment. And that is one of the biggest reasons a lot of people stay away from communities, is because they get triggered by other people in the community. But guess what? That trigger in that community is your perfect opportunity to learn and to grow. And one day, if you really become gentle and curious about it and talk to that individual, you can evaporate that very same trigger. And we're living embodiments of that, aren't we? We have to be. If we're leading a community, we can't be triggered by every single one of you. That doesn't help things, does it? Because guess what? We're all learning, we're all growing, and we're all constantly stepping on each other's toes from time to time. And, it's a natural, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a natural byproduct of coming together. When you're learning to dance, let's use a line dancing or a two-stepping example. When you're learning to two-step, you're going to step on each other's toes. But how the hell are you going to get to becoming fantastic at dancing if you're afraid to touch the other person or if you're afraid to get some toes stomped on? Make sense? Breathe that in for a moment. I love this. Misunderstandings lead us to fight against life. Here we think we're fighting for life, but because we're constantly full of division within ourselves, we're really fighting against life. And so we lose our peace in justification for the imbalance of our heart, mind, and spirit. So anytime we feel triggered by something, we allow it to justify us losing our peace. Who's done that before? Yeah, and conflicts often begin in the mind. Conflicts often begin in the mind. Let's take a breath. One more. So when we start to rectify, when we start to bring balance to the mind, body, heart, and spirit, following the peace teachings, the chaos of the mind is no longer there. And you're no longer creating conflicts in the mind with other people. Who still argues with people in your own mind? Or who still gives people a piece of your mind in your mind, but you don't really say it? That stops happening. And when that stops happening, and you actually interact with these individuals outside of yourselves in the world, there's no longer that already built-in defensiveness. You're just naturally open and relaxed with that individual. And even though I talked about this also in that same post, I've always been a kind individual. It's I guess it's my nature, wouldn't you say? Even since I was a little boy, it's kindness was always there. But even in the first few years of having our first community, it was interesting how it's still conflicts happening. And a lot of it was because I didn't have peace within myself. And when you're at peace within yourself, such as how we are today, conflicts don't seem to happen as much. For those of you who understand the law of attraction principles, you just don't really attract those conflicts anymore. And even if you do, you're responding completely differently to them than you would have if you were already arguing with that person in your mind, because then you feel defensive. And then when you actually have that interaction, both people are on edge, and you're just like two little dogs like staring at each other. What's going to happen next? You know, when you get two dogs, you just see this little chihuahua with big eyes, like, oh, what's going to happen? Do I have to be on my guard or not? We don't know. And so what's beautiful about this is that you start to recognize that nearly all conflicts are still conflicts. Because when you stop participating in the chaotic energy, other people may still have conflicts with you, but it's not, they may still have conflicts towards you, but it's not with you anymore because you're not participating. And I would say one of the number one things that led us to really embody peace is that we just stopped participating in conflict altogether. And for those of you who heard our message from when those two gentlemen came into our lives and had that threat, they were having an issue towards us, but it wasn't with us because we weren't actively participating in their reality of conflict. Our reality was one of peace. So my invitation to all of you is, if you want to dive deeper into this stuff, work with me, join our classes. You know, obviously these Sundays are inspiring and fun. Like, who has fun on these Sundays? We have fun here. But I can only share so much in a group setting. It really comes down to being able to work on an individual basis, get into that subconscious mind, get into that box of crazy, and root it out, root it out, root it out. Let's, every single week, let's find something new to explore together. Let's go deeper into the teachings. Let's learn the practices. And that's why I think I am going to formulate some type of, starting in 2 weeks, some type of group class on Wednesday nights that are not just the program, but something else where anyone can attend and really learn how to speak from the heart, really listen with deep listening, deep compassion, without being triggered and having their opinions spill over, having their own wounds of abuse spilling onto the other people, producing more fear, producing more guilt, producing more shame. None of that helps. Does that make sense? Take a breath in. So I want to conclude with this little statement here. So the three middle teachings we have. The first three are mastery of thought, impulse, emotion. The final three are release the mundane, knowing, and self. And then the three are, we're cultivating understanding, then we're cultivating harmony, then we're cultivating transcendence. Understanding, I like to refer that to self. I'm constantly practicing in my meditation, my mindfulness. I'm developing an awareness of self. And so anytime I'm triggered, I can really touch the root of that trigger and develop understanding from this conflict that I'm feeling right now, either inside or externally. And then we have harmony, and that's when we're coming together. We're learning to take that understanding and apply it on a community platform, where we're looking out for one another, where we're showing up for one another. As Anderson was saying previously, we're showing up for one another because our presence has meaning. And then when we're checking in with one another, when we're seeing other people suffering, we're not just telling them, well, get out of that relationship, you dummy. That doesn't help anyone. Who's been told that before? Did that help you? No, you stayed in it for another 10 years and suffered. Just stop drinking. Just stop smoking. Just stop. That doesn't help shit. Telling people what not to do is not helping. But when you actually listen to their story and you understand the root of their pain, and you can help them find that root and heal that root, then it will be an effortless transition into well-being. But instead, we're just so focused on the surface level bullshit that we're arguing about it that we don't get anywhere, and our whole world continues to suffer. I don't know if it was Thich Nhat Hanh. I think this is taught by a lot of people. But we're all going to suffer. It's just a natural part of life. The Buddha taught that. One of the the first noble truth is life is suffering. Welcome. And really, it just means life is stressful, life there's grief, because everything's impermanent. Everyone you love is going to pass away at some point. Everything you care about is going to fade. So there is suffering in life. So it's not about stopping suffering, it's learning how to suffer well. It's learning how to suffer with grace. And we do that by coming together in community, by supporting one another, because when you're together in community, you all can share a bit of that suffering. And it doesn't have to be all on one person's shoulders, which leads to some crazy ass shit. Who's tried to carry the weight of the world before? And it's caused you to do some crazy things, right? You don't have to do that anymore. And so this is my proclamation to all of us here, is that this is where our community is going. We're now on 3 months, concluding our 3 months of existing. So that's pretty cool. But as we work more and more together and learn more about each other, we're going to start working together and start reaching out to the rest of the world, reaching out to the rest of other communities that are in pain, so that we can show up and listen and really hear what's going on. And that way we can respond to it and help bring that unifying energy. It's not a solo mission anymore. Does that sound good? Let's breathe that in. And finally, transcendence, rising above. Pain turns into joy. We still feel pain, but we also feel joy every single day, wouldn't you say? I'm not making this up. You agree? Cool. I always like to check in, right? I'm not speaking for you. It's sure, pain happens, but you can also start living in perpetual peace and joy. And if you do the work, you will achieve that. So please contemplate that. Contemplate if you're ready to really sign up and to start learning these practices on a very base primordial level within your being, because it's there and it's possible. Deep breath in. Concluding words on your end?
When I think about chaos a lot, when I first met Alaric and he gave me the first edition of his book, I'm going through the Living Peace Code and I'm reading it, and I was a middle school teacher at the time, so when I got to There's No Chaos, I'm like, what? What? But what I realized was, and also, fun fact, the little known thing about me is I had a lot of road rage actually in my early 20s. That's like where my one kind of crazy manifested itself. So when I started working with Alaric about chaos, one thing I kind of realized was the more I worked within myself, and like he was saying, we worked on my subconscious roots, suddenly I could drive in traffic with someone cutting me off and I don't care anymore. So it's like a freeway is still going to be intense, but I don't have to react to the people around me. And I started like, I was kind of creating my own chaos, because then someone cuts me off, I make a story, I drive up really close to them, I'm in a situation. So I stopped doing that. And being a middle school teacher, it's like, obviously teenagers come in the classroom, woo! But I used to think of chaos, and I'm like, these crazy kids, But then I just realized, no, there's no right or wrong. They're children. I don't need to think of them as chaotic or crazy. They just have a lot of energy. And me going, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Hey, stop that, go over here. What's that going to do? Instead, I just stood there, and they all kind of just settled eventually. Or I would just have to give them a look. And then and I would do what he did. I'm just like, let's take a breath. And then suddenly it dissipates. But if I'm freaking out, that doesn't help either. So a lot of what I thought was chaos was, there's energy, but there's a lot of what I perceived as chaotic was all in my head. And once I took that out of it, I could then respond peacefully. And then other people really do match your vibration. So I've had, same thing I had about with laryngitis. One time as a teacher, we were going on a field trip, and all the kids come running in, and I just looked at them and said, and they all were like, shh, okay, look. And they all just matched my energy. They really can match you if you're not freaking out. And so, or even we're learning with our dog. If our dog starts freaking out, we're like, stop it. No, we just get right down. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes she's freak out, but
it's her nature.
It is, but she's a dog. We can't think of her as this immediately obedient thing. She is an animal.
She's not an extension of who we are.
Exactly.
But a lot of people view their pets as such.
Yeah. And so, long story short, a lot of it's in your head.
It is. So here's the concluding question I forgot to add. And for those of you who have little pens and papers, you want to write this down. This could be your take-home homework. Anytime you feel triggered by anything, anyone, just everything. Who am I really in conflict with here? Ask yourself that question. Who am I really in conflict with here? And see if you can find the division within your own mind. Who am I really in conflict with in here? And see if you can find that division. Because I guarantee that you're going to find a division within your mind, your body, your heart, spirit, somewhere it's there. Because this is the truth of the work, and this is, I guess, why it's sometimes helpful to have teachers, is that since we live this full-time ideas in every area of their life, I can't think of one scenario, even the most painful experiences in my past, where I can point the finger anymore and say I did not have a role in that somewhere, somehow. And I chose to be there. I chose to be there. Let's take a breath. I'm going to turn my attention to the camera. Hello. As always, we want to thank you for joining in. And it was quite the journey today, but quite delicious and nutritious. And so for those of you at home who enjoy the sermon, please consider donating. It really helps us build our Sangha, build our community. There is a lot of bills to pay. And so everything, all the contributions that we're receiving really, really do make an impact, even if they're small. And also, if anyone is interested in working one-on-one or even in a group setting, please visit our website, zencowboy.org. That's zencowboy.org. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. Mwah. And then